Continuing on with the action on today's show, they hate Mikey. What's going on? They hate Mikey. But continuing on with the show and moving on into some more things that players are talking about now in this brief break period that we have between training camp starting and the end of mandatory minicamp. There are things that are being said that get a lot of attention in the media, but if you guys weren't aware, Micah Parsons, all-star player, all-pro player, I should say, for the Dallas Cowboys, hosts a podcast. It's called The Edge with Micah Parsons on Bleacher Report that is taped every Tuesday. Really during the season, I don't think he's recording any episodes right now, but based on that, he's recording a podcast, and people that are listeners to this, that catch the clips on social media and things like that, on the outside usually don't have the best things to say about it. They always mention it as a distraction. It's not good for the Dallas Cowboys, especially because of their recent success, always falling short. And the last thing they need to do is focus on anything else except football, football, football. And I get it to an extent, but in reality, is it always just about football? Football takes a lot of these players' lives, so they have to do something else in the meantime. But based on that, I don't really have too much of a problem with Micah doing it. But this is the first time now that I've seen a teammate comment about it. It's the first time I've seen a teammate not speak too highly of it or not, just brush it aside. That teammate is safety Malik Hooker. He was on Keyshawn Johnson's podcast recently to speak about Micah Parsons' show, about his podcast, and he, again, like I mentioned, didn't have two of the greatest things to say about it. When he talked about it, I actually have it pulled up here so you guys could see it. Malik Hooker initially talked about it by saying, "My advice for Micah would be just make sure we're all right, because if we're at work and the run game's terrible, but you're doing a podcast every week and the run game is terrible, then what are you really caring about? Are you caring about the crowd that was watching the podcast, or are you caring about the success of our team and the Super Bowl that we're trying to reach?" And pretty strong words. He didn't really hold back at all, which surprised me. It seems like he wanted to get it off his chest, right? I don't know exactly what Keyshawn asked them, what led to this. It sort of seemed like maybe the podcast was brought up, and as a older player, as a veteran on the team, perhaps in Malik Hooker, maybe Keyshawn just asked them, what would you say to Micah about, doing things off of the field on the personal side, and then just keeping the main thing. And he could have simply said that, like every football player does, typically when they offer advice or when they offer anything to say on how to manage your personal life and your career now playing football. Everybody, 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100 players usually say, just keep the main thing. Just focus on always your job, making sure that is number one. He could have easily said that, and we're moving on past that question. There was really no need to go all in on Micah Parsons like he did. Again, it seems like he wanted to just get it off his chest. It seemed like he was holding it in for a while, and that creates, some more problems now, because obviously Micah was going to see it, and he responded in a clip that he posted on social media, but it has now been deleted. But in that social media clip, he responded with what you see on the screen. He said, "Just wish you said this to me, but instead on some podcast, and you got my number, family, at Malik Hooker 24, and you my locker mate. So you could have said this any day. Why ain't we talking about everyone preparations and focus?" And pretty evident that Micah didn't really like it. And he has a point, honestly, with what he said. I'm of the feeling, when I'm a football fan, or really just a fan of any team, I don't like any outside noise, anything that's a distraction, any sort of problem outside of just football and everything that goes into preparing for another team, schematics, analytics, things like that. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a fan of airing out your dirty laundry, as some people say. Not a fan of talking about things you could easily, like Micah Parsons pointed out, things that you could have just talked and kept in-house, talked between each other. If Malik Hooker really felt a certain way about it, he could have went up to Micah and been like, "Yo, I'm not too sure about it. I don't know how, focused in you are on the podcast. I don't know how much of your time this is taking up, but just to confirm, are we really just all about football? I need to know you're all in on this." And they could have had a separate discussion, just simple conversation, or maybe a little argument personally, just one-on-one, those guys in the locker room, but instead he said it on a podcast, and now you get other people's opinions on it, and other people are going to side with Malik's, others are going to side with Micah Parsons, and now you get everybody else talking about it, asking these guys about it in press conferences or after a practice, or how is your relationship going now if this isn't so deep, but you still have other people wondering now. No questions are coming about football, or how you're preparing for week one or in training camp, or how you're just trying to get better. This just adds another list or another thing on the list to how it just seems like the Cowboys are just focusing on all the wrong things in a way, and it's really not a surprise because it almost always happens with certain things like this around Dallas. But to look at Malik Hooker's point, I agree with Micah, but just to open it up a little bit about Malik Hooker and what he was trying to say. If you guys didn't know, Micah Parsons' role at Bleacher Report is going to grow this upcoming season, as Micah was named the president of Bleacher Report Gridiron, which is the football subsection of the company. So with that, with getting this sort of promotion, if you would, you would think there's more responsibilities, there's more things that come with that, more things to keep track of if you're Micah Parsons. It's not just the podcast, which, again, I don't have a problem with, but I don't really want to speak on too much of what it means to be the president of Bleacher Report Gridiron. I could assume that he obviously has more responsibilities, more things to keep track of, like I mentioned, but maybe there's something different in it because he is still playing. I don't know. That is a gray area if you don't really know too much of these specifics. I haven't seen too much on what he's actually supposed to do. All I know is that he got that promotion, and assuming what that means, you have a bigger role in Bleacher Report. So to Malik Hooker's point, if you see that, it's not really just about the podcast if you have other things to worry about of a president of an entire subsection of a media company that you obviously have to talk about everything around the NFL, not just your point of view, your team, or anything like that. So I can understand where Malik's coming from if he was talking about that, not just the podcast. So that's one thing. And again, this is the first teammate I've seen that really commented on it. Nobody else has really said anything about it or not spoken too negatively about it at the same time. But again, with that being said, I don't really like that he did it. This could have all just been done behind closed doors with that. And it didn't have to go to social media, because now you have Micah responding on social media. And in the same light, he could have just kept that response to himself and approached Malik privately. But that's how it is, this day and age. With media growing so much, somebody says something there, an analyst says something there, another player responds, and then it just gets into this whole big mess outside of just the game. And you get all these different storylines that just don't really add to anything positively most of the time. And to talk some more about Micah and just that point that I was going on about social media, how everything just explodes on social media, anything anybody says or does. It's almost part of the times now, honestly, with it seems like more and more players are following this idea of player empowerment, doing things for them to find out what works best for them. With NIL, more players are coming in with more responsibility of keeping track of their finances and taking just more responsibility of looking out for themselves. More people are moving away from having just an agent or just representing themselves, and also finding a career after playing football, because it seems more and more we're talking about players giving advice to everybody saying that, after the game of football, it just doesn't last that long. You have to have some sort of plan of knowing what you're going to do after playing football, because really it doesn't last too long. And now we're seeing more and more players finding themselves with media opportunities while they're still playing. You look at Draymond Green for TNT or any other things he's doing. He has his own podcast. CJ McCollum is always on ESPN giving his point, his analysis. CP3, just in the finals this year, he was on the pregame show for the finals. Josh Hart, same thing. He's got a podcast. Paul George, he's got a podcast, and he was also doing that pregame stuff. Cam Hayward, another football player, he has his own podcast along with Max Crosby. More and more guys are going to start doing it. But again, it always comes down to keeping football the main thing, and I think most of them are doing it. It's not like CP3 and Josh Hart, or I should just say CP3 and CJ McCollum aren't, always appearing on it. I think just because it was the finals, because they're veterans, they don't really No one's really questioning, their love of the game or anything like that, their attention to their team. So they appeared on it here or there to give their analysis, but as long as you keep the main thing, I think that's the most important part. But it's starting to become more of a normality. You're going to see more players do it. I just rattled off, I think, 6 to 7 players in the NBA and NFL to do it. That's only going to grow. That's only going to just increase in numbers. And it also makes me think, just along this point to close this part, about the Dallas Cowboys and Malik Hooker and also Micah Parsons. It makes me think now that Malik, like I mentioned before, has been wanting to say it in a way because he went a lot deeper into it than simply just a 1 to 2 sentence statement. It almost makes me think now that maybe other teammates are feeling a way about this. Maybe other teammates share the same feeling that Malik Hooker has just said, but they're not really airing it out in public. They're just keeping it to themselves in spite, or just really not agreeing with it. And they haven't really approached Michael Parsons about it, to my knowledge. So I don't think Malik Hooker's really the only one, is what I'm trying to say. If he's feeling it, there's no chance no other player out of the 55 to 53 others in that roster are 100% right behind Micah Parsons in agreement with what he's doing. I think the older players might feel a certain way about it, especially like I mentioned, if Micah's getting a promotion, he's doing more with the company. That's the pressure of playing with the Cowboys. You want to reach the Super Bowl. You want to make sure everyone's all invested in just playing football. We have to get over this hump of failing in the playoffs. But if somebody else is doing things outside of it and doing it pretty regularly, it gets to this point where you come to a disagreement. But again, I'll just close with this point. I would have preferred they kept it in-house. I think that would have been a much easier situation, because now, once you reveal personal information, I feel like people in the media or just other people that give their opinion will feel a lot safer, a lot more comfortable giving their opinion on a personal matter that you could have kept personal. But now that you aired it out, it's out there. You can't do anything about it. They feel like they can comment it on it. And now it's going to be a distraction. It's something else that I'm sure they're going to keep being asked about and talked about. But to pick a side, I'm on Micah's side. I don't think he should have said it, but, it's out there. And we'll see how it all develops, how they interact now going forward. It should be something to keep an eye on as we head closer to training camp. But in the meantime, we will head to a break now in the show, and when we return, I'm going to give some more offseason grades on teams around the NFL, this time in the AFC East. We're going to see which teams got better and what team in there I wasn't a big fan of how they went through their offseason. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back just after this break.